The courthouse gleamed under the morning sun, its marble pillars cold and indifferent to the lives unraveling within. Reporters and onlookers gathered like vultures, cameras flashing, pens poised, eager to feast on another high society scandal. The scent of expensive perfume mixed with the sterile air, a reminder that even pain wore a designer label here. Marcus Blackwood sat at the long oak table, his posture a study in calculated arrogance. His navy suit was perfectly tailored, a subtle monogram peeking from his cuff, proof of his wealth and attention to detail. He flipped through the divorce papers with an expression of mild annoyance, as though they were just another contract to sign. Across from him, Evelyn sat motionless. Her hands rested on the curve of her belly, her wedding ring glinting in the harsh fluorescent light. She wore a simple cream dress, her blonde hair pulled into a loose knot that framed her pale face. Her eyes, once full of warmth, now reflected a cold resolve, a calm that belied the storm inside her. Marcus didn't look at her as he signed the final page, his pen scratching against the paper like a blade carving through the last thread that connected them. "There," he said, voice flat. "Done." If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and like, spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from. Evelyn said nothing. She had cried enough tears in private. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Her gaze shifted to the courthouse window where the world continued on, oblivious to her heartbreak. A court clerk took the papers and disappeared. The echo of the door closing sounded like a gunshot. Marcus stood, adjusting his cufflinks with mechanical precision. "You'll be well taken care of," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "I've arranged everything, money, property. You won't want for anything." He paused as if expecting gratitude. Evelyn raised her head slowly, her eyes meeting his with a quiet strength that startled him. "It was never about the money, Marcus," she said, her voice calm. "It was about respect, something you've never been able to give me." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned and walked toward the exit, the click of his polished shoes on the marble floor echoing like a metronome counting down the seconds of their marriage. Outside, through the glass doors, Sienna waited. She wore a red dress that clung to every curve, her smile predatory and triumphant. As Marcus approached, she hooked her arm through his, her laughter a sharp, glittering thing that sliced through Evelyn's composure. Evelyn watched them go, her hand resting on her belly. A small, knowing smile curved her lips. She had seen enough to know that the story was far from over, and in that smile, a secret waited to be revealed. The night air was thick with the scent of roses and champagne as guests arrived at the Blackwood estate. Valets in crisp uniforms guided sleek cars to their places, the engines purring like well-fed predators. A hush fell over the crowd as they entered the grand hall, eyes widening at the spectacle before them. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a cold, unforgiving light on the marble floors and golden accents. Every detail had been arranged to perfection, just as Marcus liked it. The press had been kept at bay, though whispers had already started to circulate. Marcus Blackwood's scandalous wedding, no sign of the pregnant ex-wife. Marcus stood at the altar, his posture rigid, his expression carved from stone. He wore a navy tuxedo, tailored to accentuate the sharp angles of his jaw and the cold calculation in his eyes. The guests shifted uncomfortably, the air humming with anticipation and judgment. Sienna entered on a wave of perfume and silk, her red gown, hugging her curves like a second skin. Her smile was a weapon, sharp, practiced, and lethal. She moved down the aisle with the grace of a predator, her eyes fixed on Marcus as if the rest of the world had ceased to exist. Their vows were a performance, each word dripping with false devotion. Marcus slipped the ring onto Sienna's finger. Diamond so large it seemed to mock the sanctity of the occasion. Cameras flashed as the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, but even the applause felt rehearsed. Outside the hall, Evelyn stood in the shadows, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her belly. The moonlight caught the edge of her hair, giving her an ethereal glow that no designer gown could replicate. She watched as Sienna clung to Marcus's arm, her laugh slicing through the night like glass. A tabloid photographer turned his lens toward Evelyn, but she turned away, her expression unreadable. She had learned long ago that in Marcus's world, appearances were everything, and appearances could kill. Inside, Marcus raised a glass to his guests. "To new beginnings," he declared, his voice smooth as silk. Sienna's laughter rang, out beside him high and clear, the sound of victory echoing off the marble walls. Evelyn slipped back into the shadows, her smile small and knowing. Let them have their moment in the spotlight, she thought. Let them believe the game was won. Because beneath the surface of her calm facade, Evelyn held a secret that would shatter their world. She reached into her pocket, fingers brushing against the folded papers that had become her shield. Evidence Marcus never thought she'd find. Proof of the lies he'd woven so carefully, and the empire built on betrayal. The night air was cool against her skin, the stars winking like hidden witnesses. She pressed her hand to her belly, a quiet strength filling her chest. Soon, the world would know the truth. And Marcus Blackwood would discover that even the most powerful men could be brought to their knees. Evelyn pushed open the heavy oak door of the mansion, the familiar scent of polished wood and roses greeting her like a ghost. The silence pressed in around her, wrapping itself around her heart like a cold hand. Every footstep echoed in the emptiness, a reminder that Marcus had stripped this place of laughter, of warmth, of the dreams they once shared. She paused in the grand foyer, her eyes drifting to the portrait that hung above the staircase, a smiling couple frozen in time. Marcus's hand rested on her shoulder, his eyes bright, his smile disarming. She remembered the day that photo was taken. Long before the lawyers, the tabloids, the mistress in red. Back when she believed in forever. She let out a slow breath and ran her hand over her belly. The baby kicked, a soft flutter that pulled her back from the darkness. She whispered, "We're going to be okay," though the words tasted like ashes. Moving through the house, she found herself in the study. Bookshelves lined the walls, each one a monument to Marcus's ambitions. His presence lingered in the smell of old leather and expensive cologne. She trailed her fingers over the spines of the books, stopping at the one she had found by accident. A ledger tucked between volumes of corporate strategy and market predictions. She'd sat on this very couch, legs curled beneath her, reading the numbers that spelled out Marcus's betrayal. Shell companies, offshore accounts, secret bribes to city officials. All carefully documented, all hidden from the public eye. He'd built his empire on lies, and now she held the proof in her trembling hands. Her lips curled into a small, hollow smile. He had always underestimated her, told her she was too soft, too trusting. But she had learned that sometimes silence was a weapon, that a smile could be a shield. Learned that strength wasn't always loud. A soft knock rattled the silence. She turned, half expecting, to see Marcus's imposing figure filling the doorway. But there was no one. Only the creak of the house settling, the wind whispering secrets through the cracks. She crossed the room to the window, staring out into the night. The estate grounds stretched before her, perfectly manicured, perfectly cold. Somewhere beyond those gates, Marcus was celebrating his new life, his new bride. Let him have it, she thought. Let him think he'd won. Because Evelyn knew something he didn't. She knew that even the strongest towers could crumble if you found the right foundation to strike. And she had found his. She pressed a hand to the pocket of her dress, feeling the comforting weight of the ledger's copy she'd made, hidden so carefully that even Marcus's best investigators wouldn't find them. A single tear slid down her cheek, but her smile remained. This was no longer the smile of a broken woman. It was the smile of a survivor. She turned from the window, her spine straightening as resolve filled her veins. Marcus thought he had broken her, but he had only made her stronger. And soon he would learn the cost of underestimating Evelyn Blackwood. Evelyn sat in the study, the dim light from the desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. The ledger lay open before her, its pages filled with Marcus's neat handwriting, a map of his crimes hidden in plain sight. Offshore accounts, shell corporations, payments to men whose names she didn't recognize but whose signatures testified to Marcus's influence. Each line was a confession written in ink. She traced her finger down the page, her stomach tightening with each new revelation. Every dollar funneled into a phantom company, every bribe to silence a competitor, every threat that vanished an enemy. Marcus hadn't just built an empire, he had orchestrated a kingdom of fear and corruption. A flash of memory seized her, the night she'd found the ledger. Marcus had come home late, the smell of whiskey clinging to his breath, his tie loosened like a noose. He'd tossed the book aside carelessly, thinking she'd never dare look inside. But curiosity had always been her quiet rebellion, and that night curiosity had changed everything. She could still hear his voice, that practiced calm that always followed his anger. "Stay out of my business, Evelyn," he'd said. "You wouldn't understand." She had understood. She'd understood that the man she married was a stranger, that the father of her child was a predator in a tailored suit. She remembered her hands shaking as she copied every page, every detail, onto a flash drive she'd hidden inside a broken vase in the guest room. She'd spent nights in the dark, scanning documents, her heart hammering with fear and defiance. In the shadows of her own home, Evelyn had become a hunter. She leaned back in the chair, the weight of the secrets pressing down on her. But with every breath she felt the burden shift from fear to purpose. This was more than revenge. It was justice. Not just for her, but for every person Marcus had destroyed in his climb to power. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She tensed, half expecting Marcus's towering silhouette. But it was Anna, the housekeeper, her eyes wide with worry. "Ma'am?" Anna whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "He's coming home." He called ahead. Evelyn's heart skipped. She snapped the ledger shut, slipping it beneath the floorboard she'd loosened months ago. "Thank you, Anna," she whispered. "You've done more for me than you know." Anna's gaze softened. "Be careful, ma'am. He's not himself lately." Evelyn nodded, a cold determination settling over her. "I know," she said, "but I'm not the same woman I used to be." Anna's eyes glistened with tears. "If you need anything, I know where to find you," Evelyn finished, offering a small, grateful smile. Anna nodded and left, the door closing with a soft click. Alone again, Evelyn stood, her hand pressing against her belly. "For you," she whispered, her voice trembling but strong. "For both of us." She moved to the window, watching the headlights sweep across the driveway. Marcus's car, a black sedan that always gleamed in the sun, pulled up like a specter. He was home, but so was she. She felt the evidence hidden beneath the floor, the power it gave her. Marcus thought she was weak, thought she'd crumble under the weight of his betrayal. But he had taught her too well. She had learned that shadows could be allies, that secrets could be weapons. And as Marcus stepped from the car, his figure sharp against the night, Evelyn's hollow smile returned. Because soon, the hunter would become the hunted. Sienna sat alone in the penthouse living room, the city lights sprawling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows like a sea of artificial stars. The diamond on her finger sparkled under the dim lamplight, but tonight it felt like a shackle rather than a prize. Marcus had been late, again. His promises of romantic dinners and whispered secrets had faded into terse phone calls and cryptic emails. She'd tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in her gut, the whisper that maybe she'd traded one prison for another. She heard the door click open and felt his presence before she saw him. Marcus's footsteps were deliberate, each one heavy with authority. He moved like a man who expected the world to bend to his will. "You're still up," he said, his tone flat. He loosened his tie as he crossed the room, his eyes glinting like shards of glass. Sienna forced a smile, but her voice trembled. "I waited for you. You said you'd be home by 8. He shrugged, his indifference palpable. Meetings ran late. Investors needed reassurance. Investors, she echoed. The word tasted bitter on her tongue. Is that all you think about, money, power? What about us, Marcus? He turned, his gaze sharp and cold. Us? He scoffed. You think this is about love, Sienna? About romantic dinners and holding hands? His laugh was a jagged sound. You wanted this life, you wanted the glamour, you wanted to be Mrs. Marcus Blackwood. Well, congratulations, you got it. Her chest tightened. That's not what I meant. I thought... Her voice broke. I thought you loved me. Marcus's eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint in their depths. Love is a game, Sienna, a tool. You should know that by now. She recoiled as if struck, tears burning her eyes. The man before her was not the charming, ambitious entrepreneur she'd fallen for. He was something else, something darker. She tried to stand, but he caught her wrist, his grip iron. Don't walk away from me, he hissed, his voice low, but lethal. You don't get to walk away. Her breath hitched, her heart pounding in her chest. Marcus, she whispered, you're hurting me. He released her abruptly, as if her touch burned. Don't forget who made you, he said, his voice a warning. Without me, you'd still be nothing. Sienna clutched her wrist, her pulse racing. The diamond on her finger felt heavier than ever, a reminder of the price she'd paid for a life that glittered but offered no warmth. She watched him walk away, his silhouette disappearing into the darkness of the hallway. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but beneath them a new emotion simmered. Doubt. Doubt in him. Doubt in herself. Doubt in the choices that had led her here. She had thought she'd won. But now she saw the bars in the cage she'd chosen. And somewhere in the shadows of her heart, a question took root. What if Evelyn had been right all along? Evelyn sat in the sterile white examination room, the smell of antiseptic sharp in her. Towards the hum of fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like a restless wasp. She shifted uncomfortably on the paper-covered table, her hands resting protectively over the gentle swell of her belly. The door creaked open, and Dr. Ramirez stepped in, clipboard in hand. His expression was kind, but the tightness around his eyes gave her pause. Mrs. Blackwood, he began gently, we've reviewed your latest scans. Her heart skipped. She forced herself to meet his gaze. And? He sighed, his voice soft but steady. You're developing signs of preeclampsia. It's manageable, but it can be serious. We'll need to monitor you closely. Bed rest, a low-stress environment, and frequent checkups. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. A low-stress environment, she echoed. That's not exactly my life right now. He gave a sympathetic nod. I understand, he said. But you have to put yourself and the baby first. She nodded, tears threatening to spill. I will, she whispered, her voice cracking. The doctor placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You're stronger than you think, he said. And you're not alone. But I am alone, she thought as he left. Marcus hadn't even bothered to come. The man who had once promised to build a life with her was now too busy building his empire and his second marriage. She pressed her hands harder against her belly, feeling the small flutter of life within. A knock at the door made her flinch. A nurse peeked in, her expression apologetic. Mrs. Blackwood, there's a call for you at the front desk. It's your husband. Her stomach twisted. Thank you, she managed. She stood, her legs trembling as she walked down the hall. She took the receiver from the nurse, the cold plastic heavy in her hand. Evelyn. Marcus's voice crackled, through the line, sharp and impatient. I heard from Ramirez's office something about high blood pressure. You need to take care of this. It wouldn't look good for the company if anything happened. Her heart hardened. You're worried about the company? She asked, her voice tight. He sighed, a sound filled with exasperation rather than concern. Of course I'm worried about you. But you have to understand. If anything goes wrong, the press will have a field day. You need to keep it together. For your sake and mine. She closed her eyes, the tears burning behind her eyelids. "I'm doing my best, Marcus," she said, her voice steady but cold. "But it's hard to do that when I'm alone." He hesitated, then cleared his throat. "Just handle it," he said. "I have meetings. We'll talk later." The line went dead. Evelyn lowered the phone slowly, her reflection in the glass staring back at her with hollow eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but she brushed it away. She wouldn't cry for him anymore. Not when every tear was another victory for his indifference. She turned and walked back to the examination room, her steps heavy but determined. She would fight for her child. She would fight for herself, even if Marcus couldn't, or wouldn't, stand. Beside her, she'd stand on her own. She placed a hand on her belly. "We're in this together," she whispered, her voice trembling but strong. Outside the window, gray clouds gathered, heavy with the promise of rain. But deep inside, Evelyn felt a small spark of light, because she knew something Marcus never would. Some storms weren't meant to break her. They were meant to forge her into something stronger. The rain had finally come, a steady drizzle that painted the city in silver streaks. Evelyn stood by the window of the small cafe, watching people rush by with umbrellas and lowered heads. She cradled a cup of lukewarm tea, its steam curling into the air like fragile whispers. She had asked to meet here, neutral ground, away from Marcus's reach. The investigator had chosen the table in the far corner, his back to the wall, eyes scanning the room with practiced caution. Evelyn recognized him instantly. Daniel Cross, a former cop turned private eye with a reputation for unearthing the kind of secrets that powerful men paid good money to keep buried. She approached, her heart hammering in her chest. "Mr. Cross," she said, her voice low. He looked up, his face hard but kind. "Mrs. Blackwood," he replied, gesturing for her to sit. "I have what you asked for." She slid into the seat, her hands trembling. "Tell me." He placed a thick manila envelope on the table between them, its corners worn as if it had been handled with care and caution. "I've been following Marcus's money trail for months," he said, his voice measured. "Offshore accounts, shell companies, bribes to city officials, threats to business rivals. He's built an empire on intimidation and deceit." Evelyn swallowed, her throat tight. "Proof?" she whispered. Daniel nodded, pushing the envelope closer. "Bank statements, email transcripts, witness testimonies. Enough to sink him, if you're ready to use it." Her fingers brushed the envelope, the weight of it heavy with possibility. "And the people he threatened?" she asked. "The ones he hurt? They're scared," Daniel admitted, his voice low. "But they're willing to talk if it means taking him down. Marcus's reach doesn't extend as far as he thinks." Evelyn's lips curved into a small, determined smile. "He always thought he was untouchable," she murmured, her voice steady. "That no one could challenge him." Daniel leaned in, his eyes sharp. "You can," he said, "but it won't be easy. Men like him don't go down without a fight." She met his gaze, her chin lifting. "I'm not afraid," she said. "Not anymore." The investigator studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I'll stand by you," he said. "You're stronger than most people I've met." She took a deep breath, the rain tapping a steady rhythm against the window. The storm inside her had calmed, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. She slid the envelope into her bag, her hand steady. "Thank you, Mr. Cross," she said. "You've given me what I need." He stood, offering a small, respectful smile. "Take care of yourself," he said. "And be careful. He'll know something's wrong when you make your move." She nodded, her eyes steady. "I'm counting on it." As he disappeared into the rain, Evelyn sat alone, the envelope heavy in her lap. She felt the baby move inside her, a reminder of the future she was fighting for. Marcus Blackwood had taught her fear, but he had also taught her how to survive. And now, armed with the truth, she was ready to fight. The game had changed, and Marcus would never see it coming. The clock struck. Midnight as Evelyn pushed open the heavy oak door of Marcus's office. The city skyline glowed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the room in cold, sterile light. Shadows danced across the polished mahogany desk where Marcus sat, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked up, eyes sharp and calculating. "Evelyn," he drawled, a smirk playing at his lips. "I didn't expect you. Couldn't sleep?" She stood in the doorway, the envelope Daniel had given her clutched tightly in her hand. "We need to talk," she said, her voice calm but laced with steel. Marcus raised an eyebrow, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Talk? After all this time? Now you want to talk?" She stepped into the room, her heels silent on the carpet, her eyes fixed on him. "I've seen the truth, Marcus. The offshore accounts, the bribes, the threats, every dirty deal you've ever made." His smirk faltered, but only for a moment. "You've been snooping," he said, voice low. "I should have known you'd play the victim card eventually." She dropped the envelope on his desk. The papers spilled out, evidence of his empire built on lies and betrayal. "This isn't about playing the victim," she said. "It's about justice. For me. For everyone you've hurt." He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. His face twisted into a sneer. "You think you can take me down with this?" He gestured at the papers like they were a bad joke. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," she replied, her voice unwavering. "A man who destroys everything he touches. A man who thinks power means he's untouchable." His eyes narrowed, a flash of panic hidden behind the rage. "You don't know what you're doing, Evelyn," he hissed. "You're pregnant, emotional. Let's be reasonable. I can fix this, make it all go away. You and the baby can live in comfort. No one has to know." She stared at him, the weight of every betrayal pressing on her chest. "It's too late for that," she whispered. "I'm done letting you control me. Done letting you hurt people." He circled the desk like a predator, his movements slow and deliberate. "Think about what you're doing," he pleaded, his tone shifting like quicksand. "You need me. You've always needed me." She stood her ground, her gaze steady. "No, Marcus," she said, her voice like a blade. "I needed you once, but now I've learned I'm stronger without you." His face contorted, fury and desperation warring within him. "I gave you everything," he roared. "The house, the lifestyle. Everything you have is because of me." She took a step closer, her eyes cold. "Everything I have is because I survived you." He lunged then, his hand outstretched, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she lifted her chin, her breath steady. "Go ahead," she said softly. "Prove to everyone who you really are." He froze, his hands suspended in the air. The whiskey glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The silence that followed was deafening. She met his gaze, unafraid. "The police have copies," she said. "The media will have them. By morning." "It's over, Marcus." His chest heaved, his eyes wide with disbelief. You can't." "I can," she said, "and I will." Outside, the city lights glowed, indifferent to the battle waged inside. Evelyn turned and walked away, leaving Marcus in the ruins of his own making. The morning sun cast a harsh light over the Blackwood estate, its rays slicing through the lingering shadows like a blade. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with every second. Evelyn watched from across the street, her heart steady despite the chaos that loomed. Police cars lined the circular drive, red and blue lights flashing in a relentless rhythm. Officers moved in coordinated precision, their radios crackling with orders. Evelyn felt a tremor in her chest, a bittersweet ache that mingled triumph with sorrow. She saw Marcus standing on the grand steps, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. His tailored suit, once a symbol of power, now looked like a costume for a fallen king. Reporters swarmed the scene, cameras clicking like mechanical locusts. Microphones jutted into the air, capturing every gasp, every whispered speculation. 2. Officers approached Marcus, their eyes hard beneath the brim of their hats. One of them, a tall man with a firm jaw, held out a pair of gleaming handcuffs. "Marcus Blackwood," he said, his voice steady. "You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." Marcus's eyes darted to the crowd, then to the cameras, then back to the officer. "This is a mistake," he spat, his voice a brittle echo of its former strength. "You have no idea who I am." The officer's expression didn't change. "I think we know exactly who you are, sir." The click of the cuffs closing around Marcus's wrists sounded louder than the wail of the sirens. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Justice had a sound, and it was cold and final. From the second-floor balcony, Sienna clutched the wrought iron railing, her face pale and tear-streaked. Her hair, perfectly styled, now clung to her cheeks in damp strands. She watched as the man she'd married, so charming, so ambitious, was led down the steps like a common criminal. Marcus caught her eye, his expression shifting from anger to something that looked like betrayal. "Sienna," he shouted. "Don't just stand there, do something, call the lawyers, tell them." But Sienna didn't move. She stood frozen, the tears falling faster now. The truth had arrived, and it was more devastating than any lie she'd ever believed. She had chosen him, and now the man she'd thought she loved was exposed for what he truly was. Evelyn felt a pang of empathy for the woman on the balcony, but it was fleeting. Sienna had chosen her side. Now she would live with it. The officers guided Marcus into the back of the squad car. He struggled, his face red with rage, but the cuffs held him fast. Reporters shouted questions, their voices a rising tide of chaos. Evelyn watched as the car door slammed shut. The vehicle pulled away, its lights flashing a final triumphant requiem for the man who had once ruled her world. She pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the child within her stir. The future felt uncertain, but it was hers now, free from Marcus's shadow. Sienna's sobs drifted on the morning air. Evelyn turned away, her steps steady as she walked toward her own new beginning. Justice had been served, and the cost of truth, she realized, was worth every tear. The nursery was bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun, its rays catching the edges of the mobile that hung above the crib. Tiny stars and moons swayed gently, their shadows dancing on the walls like the last remnants of a nightmare fading at dawn. Evelyn stood at the window, her newborn nestled in her arms. She marveled at the way his tiny chest rose and fell, the soft, contented sighs that spoke of innocence untouched by the world's cruelty. Outside, the city skyline stretched toward the horizon, a maze of glass and steel that had once felt like a fortress keeping her in. Now, it felt like an open door, a promise of a life finally her own. She thought of Marcus, the image of him in handcuffs, rage twisting his features as the cameras captured every angle, lingered in her mind. The man who had once towered over her like an unscalable wall had been reduced to a headline, a cautionary tale whispered over morning coffee. His empire of lies had crumbled, leaving only the truth standing. And Sienna. Evelyn remembered the woman's tear-streaked face on the balcony, eyes wide with the realization that the life she'd fought for was built on sand. Evelyn's heart ached for her, but only for a moment. Sienna had made her choices, had believed Marcus's empty promises. Now she would live with them, just as Evelyn had lived with hers. A soft coo from the baby pulled her back to the present. She pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead, inhaling the scent of new beginnings. "We're safe now," she whispered. "He can't hurt us anymore." She thought of the journey that had brought her here, the nights spent poring over ledgers, the whispered conversations with Daniel, the careful gathering of every scrap of evidence Marcus had carelessly left behind. Each step had been a battle, each revelation a dagger in her heart, but she had survived. and in surviving she had found a strength she hadn't known she possessed. A knock at the door broke her reverie. Michael stepped inside, his eyes warm and steady. He carried a small bouquet of white lilies, their delicate petals trembling as he crossed the room. "For you," he said, his voice soft. "And for him." Evelyn's smile was genuine now, free of the hollow mask she'd worn for so long. "Thank you," she murmured, taking the flowers and placing them on the windowsill. The scent mingled with the morning air, a fragile promise of peace. Michael stepped closer, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "You did it," he said. "You stood up to him. You took back your life." She met his gaze, her eyes clear and unafraid. "No," she said, her voice strong. "I rebuilt my life. On my terms. For him." She glanced down at the baby, his tiny hand curled around her finger. "For us." They stood together in the golden light, the city beyond the glass a tapestry of possibility. Evelyn felt the weight of the past lift from her shoulders, leaving behind only the lessons it had taught her. Marcus had thought he could own her, mold her into something that fit neatly into his world. But he had been wrong. She had grown in the shadows, learned to fight, to endure. And in the end, it was not his power that had won, but hers. She looked out at the city one last time, the skyline no longer a cage but a horizon waiting to be claimed. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman transformed, unbroken, and finally free. She held her child closer, the warmth of his small body anchoring her to the present. "Let's begin again," she whispered. And with that, Evelyn turned from the window, her steps sure and steady, ready to face whatever came next.